The morning Zora Williams turned 9, her mother made pancakes with the good syrup. Not the thin, pale kind that came in the plastic bottle from the corner store, the kind that was mostly water and food coloring and hope. The good syrup was the dark amber one, thick and slow and serious. The one her mother kept on the highest shelf in the cabinet above the stove and brought down only on birthdays and the last day of school, and once, memorably, on the afternoon her mother had gotten a raise that turned out to be 12 cents an hour. They had put the good syrup on everything that day. On the pancakes, on a piece of leftover cornbread, on a spoon that Zora had just held out because she was 9 years old and the world had not yet taught her to be embarrassed about joy. That was last year. This year, Zora sat at the small kitchen table in their apartment on the 3rd floor of the Glenwood Arms and watched her mother move around the kitchen with the particular efficiency of a woman who had learned to do everything in a small space without bumping into anything. Their kitchen was not big enough for 2 people to stand in comfortably. It was barely big enough for one. The refrigerator door, when opened fully, touched the opposite wall. The window above the sink looked out onto the building's interior courtyard, which meant that even in the middle of the day the kitchen had a gray, underwater quality, like sunlight filtered through several layers of something heavy. None of this was remarkable to Zora. It was simply home. Her mother, Diane Williams, was 31 years old and looked it in the best possible way. Not worn, not defeated, but present, the way a person looks when they've been paying careful attention to their own life. She had Zora's same wide-set eyes and the same habit of going completely still when she was listening, a stillness so total that people sometimes thought she had stopped breathing. She worked the early shift at the Grand Harmon Hotel downtown. Not the kitchen, not the laundry, not the freight elevator. She worked the front desk, which was not the same as the concierge, which was not the same as the guest services manager, and which Diane had explained to Zora with patient clarity was its own important thing. The front desk was where everything began. Every guest who walked through those doors passed through her. She knew their names before they arrived. She remembered their preferences. She handed them the keys to rooms they had never seen and made them feel, in the space of 3 sentences, that those rooms had been waiting for them specifically. It was a skill, Diane said. Not everyone had it. Zora believed her completely. "You're going to see Grandma B after school," her mother said, setting a plate down in front of her. The pancakes were not the birthday kind. It was a Tuesday in October, not a birthday. But they were good. Real butter. The regular syrup, but enough of it. Ms. Alvarez said she might need help with the reading group again. "I know," Zora said. "You don't have to. I know that too." Zora poured syrup carefully, watching it pool in the center before spreading. "I like the reading group." Her mother sat down across from her with her own plate and her coffee, which she held with both hands the way she did every morning, like it was an agreement she was making with the day. "There's a thing tonight," she said, "at the hotel. A private event. I might be late." Zora looked up. "How late?" Maybe 9:30. She met Zora's eyes. "Grandma B said you can stay." "I know she did. You already asked her." Diane smiled. It was the smile she gave when Zora was right, and she didn't want to make a production of it. "I already asked her," she confirmed. This was the shape of their life. Tight and real and carefully managed like a good knot. Zora understood it in the way that children understand things that have always been true. Not through explanation, but through accumulation. She knew that her mother worked 6 days a week when overtime was offered and 5 when it wasn't. She knew that the envelope in the second drawer of the dresser was for January when heating bills came due. She knew that the good syrup lived on the high shelf not because they couldn't afford it exactly, but because certain things meant more when you didn't use them every day. She also knew that her mother was the best person at her job and that it didn't always matter. She had watched Diane come home 3 months ago from a meeting with a new manager, a man who had been there 11 days, and sit down at the kitchen table and not say anything for a long time. Not crying. Just quiet. And Zora had sat across from her and also not said anything, because she had learned from her mother that sometimes quiet was the correct response to something that couldn't be fixed immediately. The new manager had given the guest services manager position to someone who had been there a year and a half fewer than Diane. He had explained this to Diane in a meeting that had lasted 7 minutes. She had thanked him, which Zora thought was the most impressive thing she had ever heard of anyone doing. It's called dignity, her mother had said later, when Zora asked about it. You keep it even when the person across from you doesn't deserve to see it. Maybe especially then. Zora had written that down in the small notebook she kept in her backpack. She wrote down things that seemed important. She had been doing it since first grade. Underscore. Underscore. Zora was not the kind of child who announced herself. She was medium height for 9, with her hair in 2 careful braids that her mother did on Sunday nights, and that lasted the week because Zora was careful with them. She wore her school uniform without complaint, navy pants, white shirt, the sweater her mother had bought 2 sizes large so it would last. She had her mother's stillness and her mother's wide eyes and her mother's habit of watching before she spoke. What she also had, and what she had not yet found a word for, was the thing her grandmother called the eye. You got the eye, Grandmobby had told her once, sitting in the armchair that had been in the family since before Zora was born. Same as your great-grandmother had. Same as I got a little of, but you got it strong. You see things. Everybody sees things, Zora had said. No, her grandmother had replied simply. Everybody looks. You see. It was true, in a way that Zora had never been able to explain properly. She noticed things, not in a showy way, not in the way of children who perform their intelligence like a trick. She simply noticed. The way a person's hands moved when they were lying. The way someone looked at a door before they opened it, whether they were expecting something on the other side or dreading it. The way a room shifted when a person walked in who thought they were more important than everyone else in it. She had been noticing things her whole life. It had not always been useful, but it had always been true. Underscore. After school, she walked to her grandmother's building 3 blocks east, the way she always did on Tuesday afternoons, past the laundromat and the Dominican restaurant and the dry cleaner with the hand-painted sign in the window that her grandmother said had been there since 9. Grandmobby lived on the 2nd floor and kept her door unlocked when she was expecting someone, which meant Zora could walk in without knocking and usually find her grandmother either in the kitchen or in the armchair watching her stories. Today she was in the kitchen, which meant something was being cooked, and that was already a good sign. Close the door behind you, Grandmobby said without turning around. Zora closed it. She dropped her backpack by the entrance and came to stand at her grandmother's elbow, looking into the pot. Rice. Chicken thighs in the oven. She could smell them. Something green on the counter waiting to be cut. Your mama called, her grandmother said. I know. She's late tonight. Big event at that hotel. Rich people doing rich people things. Her grandmother's voice held no particular feeling about this. It was simply information. You eat anything after school? Half a granola bar. That's not eating. Sit down. Zora sat at the table that was larger than her mother's, which was one of the things she liked about her grandmother's apartment. There was room to spread out here. Room for her notebook and her library book and her elbows simultaneously, which at home required negotiation. She opened her notebook. She had been writing in it on the walk over. Not words exactly, just marks, the shorthand she used when she was thinking about something and hadn't decided what she thought yet. What are you worrying at? Her grandmother asked. I'm not worrying. You make that face when you're worrying. I don't make a face. Her grandmother turned and looked at her with the expression of a person who had known her for 9 years and found the statement mildly amusing. You make a face, she said. What is it? Zora looked at her notebook. Mom's hotel, she said. The front desk. The new manager. What about him? She works hard. Zora said it flatly, not as a complaint, but as a fact she was establishing. She works harder than anyone, and he didn't see it. Her grandmother was quiet for a moment. The wooden spoon moved in the pot. Some people, she said finally, don't see until something makes them look. What makes them look? Different things for different people. She tasted the rice, added a little salt. Sometimes it's someone brave enough to say the thing out loud that everyone else already knows. She glanced at Zora, over her shoulder. Sometimes it's a child. Zora wrote that down. Underscore, 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 underscore. If this story already has you leaning in, hit that like button and subscribe to Bound Hearts. And drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. She didn't hesitate for a second. Let's see if you can stay with her all the way to the end. Underscore. The Grand Harmon Hotel had been on Sutton Avenue for 47 years, and in that time, it had hosted 6 presidents, 2 royal families, 1 notorious divorce proceeding that had somehow made it into 3 separate history books, and an annual charity gala that the city's most prominent families treated with the seriousness of a religious obligation. It occupied the entire block between 54th and 55th Street, a building of pale stone and dark glass that managed to look both permanent and recently cleaned, the way very expensive things often did. There were 12 floors, 2 restaurants, a ballroom on the 4th floor, and a smaller event space on the 7th. The lobby had marble floors and fresh flowers every morning, white orchids in winter and peonies in spring, and something that rotated seasonally at the discretion of the hotel's florist, who had held the position for 19 years and was not asked for her opinions on anything except flowers. Diane Williams stood at the front desk at 6:47 on a Tuesday evening and watched the lobby fill. Tonight was the engagement celebration of Marcus Harmon and his fiancée, Celeste Vane. Marcus Harmon was the reason the hotel was called the Grand Harmon. He had not built it. His grandfather had. But he had inherited it along with a real estate portfolio and a financial services company and a reputation in the city for being the kind of man people called formidable when they were being polite and difficult when they were not. He was 44 years old. He was not warm in the way that made people comfortable, but he was precise in a way that made people trust him, and in the circles he moved in, precision was worth more. Diane had worked his hotel for 7 years. She had spoken to him directly perhaps 12 times. He was the kind of man who noticed the front desk only when something was wrong, which she had made sure was never. And so in 7 years she had been both indispensable and invisible to him. This was the particular cruelty of doing a job very well for someone who took it for granted. She had no feelings about this. Or rather, she had filed her feelings about this in the same drawer as the January heating envelope, carefully and with appropriate distance. Celeste Vane arrived at 7:04 in a dress the color of champagne, with her hair arranged in the way that required a professional in at least 2 hours, and with the particular energy of a woman who was very used to entering rooms. She was 36. She had been engaged to Marcus for 4 months. Before that, she had worked in acquisitions at a financial firm in London, and before that, she had been married to a hedge fund manager in Geneva for 2 years and divorced for 3, and before that, she had studied art history at Cambridge and had the accent to prove it. She swept through the lobby with the ease of someone for whom lobbies were simply preambles. Diane watched her the way she watched everything. Not with judgment, just with attention. There was something, and Diane had been in the business of reading people for 7 years, which was not nothing. Something in the way Celeste Vane moved that was slightly too smooth. Like a person who had practiced entering rooms rather than someone who simply did it. A performance where there should have been ease. She noted it the way she noted everything. Filed it. Moved on. The event was in the Grand Ballroom, 4th floor. 120 guests, confirmed reservation, catering arranged through the hotel's kitchen. The private security, 2 men Diane did not recognize, but who moved with the practiced invisibility of professionals, had arrived at 6:30 and swept the ballroom and the corridors around it. Standard protocol for an event of this size with a host of this profile. What was not standard was the way one of the security men, the younger one, broad-shouldered with a careful face, had paused at the corridor junction near the service elevator on his sweep and spoken, very quietly, into his earpiece. Diane had been walking past with a guest services folder. She had heard 4 words. Not yet. Wait for confirmation. She had not stopped walking. She had not changed her pace or her expression. She had continued to the elevator bank, pressed the button, and ridden up to the 4th floor to confirm the floral arrangements were correctly positioned. But she had heard those 4 words, and they lived in her now the way things did when she was paying the right kind of attention. Marcus Harmon stood at the bar near the ballroom entrance at 7:38 and thought about almost nothing. This was, in its way, a skill. He had cultivated it over the years. The ability to stand in a room full of people who wanted things from him and project the appearance of contentment while thinking about virtually nothing at all. It was a kind of armor, or maybe just numbness. He had stopped distinguishing between the two around the time he turned 40. He was a large man, not physically imposing in the way of someone who worked at it, but solidly present, the kind of man who occupied a room because he had always occupied rooms and had never been given a reason to make himself smaller. His face was the kind that cameras liked. Strong jaw, steady eyes, the quality photographers called authority, and that his mother had called your grandfather's stubbornness in a suit. He held a glass of scotch and watched his fiancée work the room and thought that she was very good at it. She was genuinely very good at it. She knew when to touch an arm and when to laugh and when to look serious. She adjusted her presentation for every person she spoke to with a fluency that he admired in the abstract and occasionally found, when he was being honest with himself, slightly unnerving. He had once mentioned this to his closest friend, a man named Desmond who had known him since university, and Desmond had said, "Every performer chooses their audience, Marcus. The question is whether you know which one you are." He had not asked Desmond what he meant by that. He had been meaning to for 4 months. Celeste caught his eye across the room and smiled at him. It was a beautiful smile. He smiled back. He had been meaning to ask Desmond a number of things for 4 months. Underscore. The woman who would change everything arrived at the hotel at 7:51 and was not supposed to be there at all. Zora Williams came because her grandmother had fallen asleep in the armchair at 7 o'clock with the television on, the way she sometimes did, the way that was usually fine and was almost always fine, but which tonight had left Zora sitting in the apartment with her notebook and her library book and the leftovers her grandmother had packed for her, and the particular restlessness of a child who had too much to think about. She had tried to read. She had eaten half the rice and put the rest back. She had sat on the floor and looked at the ceiling. She had thought about her mother working late and the manager who had given the promotion to someone else, and the 4 things her mother had said about dignity, and the thing her grandmother had said about being seen, and she had thought, in the slow, specific way, she thought about most things that she did not want to just sit in the apartment waiting for something. Her mother worked at the Grand Harmon Hotel. It was 7 blocks away. Zora knew that she was not supposed to show up at her mother's workplace. She knew this clearly and without ambiguity. She also knew that she would not go inside in any disruptive way, that she was not a child who was disruptive, that she simply wanted to be nearby, and that she would call her mother's cell phone first, and if her mother said, "Don't come," she would not come, and if her mother didn't answer, she would walk there and sit in the lobby in the section near the windows where the chairs were and wait. She called. It went to voicemail. Her mother never had her phone during a shift. Zora left her grandmother a note on the kitchen table. Went to see Mom at work, be back by 9, and put on her coat and picked up her backpack and walked 7 blocks to the Grand Harmon Hotel. Underscore. She knew, the moment she walked in, that something was different about tonight. Not wrong, not yet, just different. The lobby was not the way it usually was when she had come to meet her mother for the walk home on ordinary evenings. Usually the lobby was a kind of careful quiet, the particular hush of a place that was expensive enough that people inside it felt obligated to moderate themselves. Tonight, there were more people moving, more people in good clothes. The sound level was higher. There was a feeling of occasion, the way a space changes when something significant is happening somewhere inside it. She scanned the room and found her mother at the front desk. Diane saw her at almost the same moment, and her expression did the thing it did when Zora showed up somewhere unexpected. A brief, precise flash of something between surprise and warmth that resolved into composure before anyone standing nearby would have registered it had happened at all. She held up one finger. Zora nodded and walked to the cluster of chairs near the windows and sat down. She was good at waiting. She took out her notebook. She looked at the lobby. She had a clear sight line to the elevator bank, to the corridor that led toward the restaurant on the left, and to the short hallway to the right that led to what she was fairly sure was the catering service entrance, because twice she had seen people in white kitchen coats come from that direction carrying things. She wrote, "Everyone is going up. 4th floor." She wrote, "The woman in the gold dress came in at 7. She touched every arm." She thought about what her grandmother had said. Sometimes it's someone brave enough to say the thing out loud. She was not sure yet what the thing was. Underscore. At 8:12, two things happened almost simultaneously. The first, Celeste Vane left the ballroom. Zora knew this because she had been watching the elevator. She had been watching the elevator because the security man she had noticed earlier, the broad-shouldered younger one, had come down from the 4th floor at 8 o'clock exactly and taken up a position in the lobby near the corridor junction. And something about the way he stood, the specific direction of his attention, made her look at what he was looking at, which was the elevator. At 8:12, the elevator opened and Celeste Vane stepped out. She was alone. She had her phone in her hand, and she walked quickly, not rushed exactly, but with the particular forward energy of someone who wanted to cover ground before being noticed covering it, toward the corridor that led to the right, toward what Zora had decided was the service entrance area. The security man's gaze followed her, but he did not move. Zora watched. The second thing that happened at 8:12 was that a man came in through the hotel's side entrance. Not the main entrance, the side one that Zora could see from her chair through a partial glass partition, and he was not in good clothes. He was in a dark jacket over a work shirt, and he moved quickly and quietly, and he went to the same corridor where Celeste had gone. Zora wrote in her notebook, "The woman left alone. Someone came in the side door. They went to the same place." She thought about this for a moment. She was 9 years old, and she had not lived a complicated life, but she had read a great many books, which in some ways amounted to the same thing. She had read enough to know what it looked like when two people were coordinating something they did not want observed. She also knew that she did not know what they were coordinating. It might be nothing. It might be completely fine. She was a child sitting in a hotel lobby, and she had seen a woman leave a party and a man come in a side door. She sat with this for 2 minutes and 40 seconds. She counted. Then she stood up, put her notebook in her backpack, and walked toward the corridor. She did not go far. She was not reckless. She was not the kind of child who pushed into situations without thinking about them. She went as far as the first bend in the corridor, which gave her a partial view of a small alcove area near the service entrance that was mostly used for deliveries, and she stopped there and stayed very still the way she had always been good at staying still. And she listened. She heard two voices. One was Celeste Vane's. She knew it from the accent, which was distinctive, and from the cadence, which was the cadence of someone who was used to being the most persuasive person in the room. The other voice was a man's. American. Lower. She did not know it. "Can't wait past Thursday," the man was saying. "The window closes Thursday. After that, the transfer looks irregular, and they will flag it." "I'm aware," Celeste said. Her voice was different from the voice Zora had heard her use in the lobby. Harder. The performance quality was gone. "He signs Thursday morning at the meeting. The amended documents go through before noon. By the time anyone looks at the structure, I'll be 4 months into the marriage, and the European assets are mine under the prenuptial provisions." A pause. And if he looks at the amended documents before he signs? He won't. He trusts the advisors. He trusts me. That's been the entire point. Another pause. Longer. What about the CFO? He flagged something in the preliminary review. Celeste's voice, when she answered, had a quality that made the back of Zora's neck go cold. Not loud, not angry, just final. The CFO's contract review comes up in January. Marcus will handle it the way I recommend he handle it. By February, the CFO's concerns will be irrelevant because he won't be CFO. Silence. Then footsteps. Zora moved. She went back down the corridor the way she had come, quickly and quietly, and she was back in the chair near the windows before anyone came around the corner. She sat down and put her hands in her lap and looked at her notebook and did not write anything for a long time because her hand was shaking very slightly and she needed them to stop. She was 9 years old, and she had just heard a woman plan to steal from the man she was going to marry. She thought, he trusts her. That's been the entire point. She thought about her mother. She thought about 7 years. She thought about the manager who had given the promotion to someone who had been there a year and a half fewer, and the way her mother had thanked him anyway, because that was dignity, and you kept it even when the person across from you didn't deserve to see it. She thought, someone has to say the thing out loud. Underscore. Getting to Marcus Harmon was not straightforward. She knew his name from the hotel. She had heard her mother say it. She knew he was upstairs because she had seen the event listed on the board near the concierge desk that said Harmon Private Engagement Celebration, Grand Ballroom, 7 p.m., and she had understood, when she walked in, that the occasion in the air was his. She went back to her mother. Diane looked up from the front desk, and her expression did the careful, controlled thing again. Zora. Her voice was very quiet. What are you doing here? Where's Grandma B? She fell asleep. I left her a note. Zora put her hands flat on the desk. She looked at her mother directly. I need to tell you something. Diane read her face. 7 years at the Grand Harmon Hotel had made her excellent at reading faces. She leaned forward slightly. What happened? Zora told her in a low, precise voice exactly what she had heard. Not embellished, not summarized. The specific words, in order, as accurately as she could recall them. Her mother's expression went very still during this, the total stillness Zora knew from years of watching. And when Zora finished, she said nothing for a moment. Then, you're sure? Yes. Zora. Her mother's voice was careful and specific. What you're describing is serious. I know. If you're wrong, I'm not wrong. Diane looked at her daughter. She knew Zora's certainty. She had been watching it for 9 years. It was not the certainty of a child who confused confidence with truth. It was the certainty of someone who did not say things until they were sure. She also knew what was at stake. She worked in this hotel. Whatever she did in the next 5 minutes would not be without consequence for her. She thought for 2 seconds. Zora counted. Come with me, her mother said. Underscore. Underscore. Diane Williams had been working the Grand Harmon for 7 years, and in that time, she had spoken directly to Marcus Harmon 12 times. She was about to make it 13, and she was going to do it in the middle of his engagement party. She handed the desk to the evening associate, said she had a guest matter to address, and walked with Zora to the elevator. They rode up to the 4th floor in silence. Diane's posture was the posture of someone who had decided what they were going to do and was not looking back from it. The ballroom entrance was attended by a young man in a hotel jacket who knew Diane by sight and looked surprised to see her with a child. I need to speak with Mr. Harmon, Diane said. It's a matter I need to bring to him directly. The event is, I'm aware. Her voice was pleasant and utterly immovable. Please let him know Diane Williams from the front desk need a moment. Tell him it's urgent. The young man went inside. They waited in the corridor. Zora stood beside her mother and was very still. Marcus Harmon came out of the ballroom looking the way people look when they have been pulled from a social event. Slightly compressed, slightly impatient, with the expression of someone who has decided to give you 45 seconds before they recalibrate. He looked at Diane. He looked at Zora. Something in his expression shifted slightly at the child. Ms. Williams, he said. He knew her name, which meant he paid more attention than Diane had given him credit for. What is it? Diane said. There is something my daughter needs to tell you, Mr. Harmon. I need to ask you to listen to her the same way you would listen to me. He looked at Diane for a moment. Then he looked at Zora. Your daughter? Yes, sir. He looked at Zora again. She was 9 years old. She was in her school uniform with her coat over it, and her backpack on one shoulder, and her hair in 2 braids that her mother had done on Sunday. She looked back at him with her wide, careful eyes, and she did not look away. He said, all right, tell me. And Zora told him. Underscore. She used the same method she had used with her mother. Exact words, in order, without embellishment. She did not look at the floor. She did not fidget. She looked at Marcus Harmon the way she looked at everything she was serious about, with the full, attentive steadiness that her grandmother called the eye, and she told him what she had heard in the alcove near the service entrance at 8:12 on a Tuesday evening while her grandmother slept in her armchair 7 blocks away. When she finished, the corridor was very quiet. Marcus Harmon had not moved for the last 40 seconds of her account. He was still in the posture of someone who had been given 45 seconds. But the 45 seconds had long since passed, and he had not recalibrated. He was looking at Zora with an expression she did not have a word for yet, but that she knew she would think about later. He said, the amended documents. She said he signs Thursday morning, Zora said, at a meeting, and the documents go through before noon. She said that. Yes, sir. And the CFO. She said his contract review is in January, and he won't be CFO by February. Marcus Harmon looked at her for another long moment. Then he looked at Diane, then back at Zora. He said, how old are you? 9. He said nothing for a moment. Then he said, your name? Zora Williams. Zora. He said it like he was filing it somewhere. Wait here. He went back into the ballroom. Underscore. Or he did not come back out for 11 minutes. Zora and her mother stood in the corridor. Her mother did not say anything. Zora did not say anything. The sound of the party came muffled through the ballroom doors. Music, voices, the clink of glasses that meant celebration. Zora thought, he is either going to believe me or he isn't. She thought, I heard what I heard. She thought about the word her grandmother had used. Brave. She did not feel particularly brave. She felt very awake, the way she felt during a thunderstorm or right before something she had been dreading happened and was either as bad as she thought or not as bad, and either way the not knowing was over. She reached up and held her mother's hand. Her mother held it back. After 11 minutes, the ballroom doors opened. Marcus Harmon came out first. Behind him was a man Zora didn't know. In his 50s with the look of someone who handled important things carefully. This was, though she did not know it yet, his personal attorney, James Connell, who had been at the party as a guest and who had spent the 11 minutes being quietly briefed in the corner of the ballroom. Behind James Connell was the broad-shouldered security man, the young one, who had been watching the elevator. And behind them all, moving with the controlled energy of someone who is still performing, but whose performance was beginning to show its seams, was Celeste Vane. She had been told there was a matter requiring her presence. She had been told it in the particular way Marcus Harmon apparently told people things when he had already decided something. Not as a question, not as a request. She came out into the corridor, and she saw Diane Williams, and she saw the child standing beside Diane Williams, and something happened in her face that Zora noticed and cataloged and would not forget. It was very fast. A half second, maybe less. But it was recognition. Celeste Vane had seen the child before, or the child had been somewhere she had been. The calculation of it moved across her face like weather and was gone. She looked at Marcus. "What is this?" Marcus did not answer her immediately. He looked at Zora. "Tell me once more," he said quietly. "What you heard. As exactly as you can." Zora looked at Celeste Vane. Celeste was looking back at her with an expression that was polished and composed, and behind which something was moving quickly. Zora said, "At 8:12 tonight, you left the ballroom alone and walked to the service corridor near the side entrance. A man came in through the side door. He said the window closes Thursday and the transfer will look irregular if it goes through after that. You said Mr. Harmon signs Thursday morning and the amended documents go through before noon. You said by the time anyone looks at the structure, you'll be 4 months into the marriage and the European assets are yours under the prenuptial provisions. He asked what about the CFO, and you said his contract review is in January and you'll recommend how Mr. Harmon handles it, and by February the CFO won't be CFO. The corridor was completely silent. Zora continued. You also said Mr. Harmon trusts the advisors and trusts you, and that's been the entire point. Another silence. Then Celeste said, "That's a remarkable story." Her voice was very steady. From a child who should not have been in a restricted corridor. "The corridor isn't restricted," Zora said. "There's no sign. A beat. She's 9 years old, Marcus." Celeste turned to him. "She's the hotel employee's daughter. She wandered into a service area and overheard the specific language you used," Marcus said quietly. "The prenuptial provisions. The European assets. The structure of the transfer." He was looking at her with an expression that had gone very still. "Those are not words a 9-year-old invents." Celeste said nothing. "James." He spoke to his attorney without looking away from Celeste. "Thursday morning. The document signing." James Connell said, carefully, "There were amendments submitted last week for your review. I had flagged them as needing discussion." "You had flagged them?" "Yes. I was waiting for an appropriate moment." Marcus Harmon was quiet for a very long moment. He was the kind of man who had learned to be quiet when he was thinking something important, and the quality of his quiet now was different from the quiet of someone who was uncertain. It was the quiet of someone who was arriving at a conclusion that had been possible for some time and was now unavoidable. He turned to Celeste. He did not say anything at first. She held his gaze with the composure of a woman who had practiced composure her entire life. He said, "I'd like you to leave." She opened her mouth. "Not argue," he said. "Leave. The event continues. You'll leave. We'll speak tomorrow with our respective legal representatives." A silence in which Celeste Vane understood that the performance was over. She looked once more at Zora. It was a brief look, not long enough to be called a stare, but specific enough that Zora would remember it. Then she turned and walked toward the elevator, and the broad-shouldered security man followed at a professional distance, and the corridor was 3 people lighter. Marcus Harmon looked at Zora for a long time. She looked back. He said, "You're 9. "Yes, sir." "And you walked down a hotel corridor at 8 o'clock at night because you thought something was wrong." Zora considered this. "I walked down the corridor because something felt different," she said. "I thought it was wrong after I heard it." He almost smiled. It was not a full smile. She would not see him smile properly for another hour, but something moved in his face that was in the vicinity of one. "There's a distinction," he said. "There is," she agreed. He looked at her mother. Diane Williams had been standing through this entire encounter in the particular posture of someone who has done something they believe in and is prepared to accept whatever comes from it. It was the dignity posture. Zora recognized it from 7 years of watching her mother. Marcus Harmon said, "Ms. Williams." "Yes, sir." "You've been at this hotel 7 years." "Yes, sir." "Front desk." "Yes, sir." He looked at her for a moment that was longer than the moments he had given most things tonight. "I understand there was a guest services manager position filled in the past quarter." Diane's expression stayed composed. "Yes, sir. I didn't make that decision personally," he said. "That was a departmental recommendation." "I understand. I don't always understand the decisions made in my name," he said, and something in his voice was specific and deliberate in a way that felt, to Diane, like it was being said for the record. "I'm going to want to understand this one better." Diane nodded once. "Tomorrow," he said. "Not tonight. Tonight, I have a party to go back to and approximately 100 guests to explain nothing to." He looked at Zora again, and a 9-year-old to thank. Zora said, "You don't have to thank me. She was stealing from you." He looked at her. "People shouldn't steal from people who trust them," Zora said. It was not a complicated statement. It was simply true. Marcus Harmon said nothing for a moment. Then he said no, they shouldn't. He went back into the ballroom. Zora did not sleep well. Not because she was frightened, she was not, exactly, but because her mind kept doing the thing it did when something had happened that wasn't finished yet. It replayed. It sorted. It arranged the pieces in different orders to see which order made the most sense. She lay in her bed in the apartment on the 3rd floor of the Glenwood Arms and looked at the ceiling and thought about the specific quality of Celeste Vane's face in the moment before it had gone smooth again. The recognition, the calculation, the decision made in half a second to look composed. She thought about Marcus Harmon saying those are not words a 9-year-old invents. She thought about her mother standing in the corridor in the dignity posture, prepared to accept whatever came. She thought about the CFO, whose name she did not know, whose concerns had been dismissed with the smooth certainty of someone who believed they controlled the machinery around them. She wrote in her notebook, the CFO was right. He flagged something. Nobody listened. She wrote, when people tell the truth and nobody listens, it doesn't make the truth less true. She put the notebook on her nightstand and looked at the ceiling for another hour and finally fell asleep sometime after midnight with the lamp still on, which her mother turned off when she came in at 11:30 and stood in Zora's doorway for a moment and looked at her daughter the way she looked at very few things in the world. Underscore in the morning. Her mother made breakfast and did not bring up the night before until after Zora had eaten most of her eggs. Then she said, Mr. Harmon's office called the hotel at 9 this morning. Zora looked up. This morning, his assistant called, asking for my direct contact. Her mother was holding her coffee with both hands the way she always did, but something about the way she was sitting was different from usual. Lighter, like a person who has been carrying something and set it down. You want a meeting this week? Zora thought about this. With you. With me. A pause. And he asked whether you'd be available. Zora set down her fork. Me? You. Her mother smiled, which was not the same as her lobby smile or her front desk smile or even her at-home smile. This one was smaller and more private and meant for Zora specifically. I told them you go to school. What did they say? They said the meeting could be in the afternoon. Zora picked her fork back up. She thought about Marcus Harmon in the corridor looking at her with the expression she still did not have a word for. She thought about the way he had said there's a distinction when she had corrected him about why she had gone down the corridor. He almost smiled. Okay, she said. You don't have to go. I know. She ate a bite of egg. I want to. Her mother looked at her for a moment the way she looked at things she was proud of but did not want to make a performance of. Then she went back to her coffee. Understood. Grandma B heard the whole story at 2 o'clock that afternoon, sitting in her armchair with her feet on the footstool, and she was quiet through all of it in the way that meant she was listening very hard. When Zora finished, she was quiet for another moment. Then she said, "You went down that corridor by yourself." "Yes, ma'am." "Knowing you weren't supposed to?" Zora thought about this honestly. "I wasn't sure I wasn't supposed to. There wasn't a sign." Her grandmother looked at her with something that was not quite amusement and not quite pride, but lived in the neighborhood of both. "What did it feel like when you were standing there listening?" "Cold," Zora said. "In the back of my neck." "That's the thing telling you it's real," her grandmother said. "When you feel that, you don't doubt yourself." "I didn't. No." Her grandmother reached out and patted her hand once, firmly, the way she gave all her affection, direct and without excess. "You did right. Now the question is what comes from it." "What do you mean?" "I mean doing the right thing starts something. It doesn't finish it." She looked at Zora steadily. "You ready for what comes next?" Zora thought about Marcus Harmon's office calling the hotel at 9 in the morning. She thought about the meeting in the afternoon. She thought about the CFO whose concerns had been filed away. "Yes, ma'am," she said. Her grandmother nodded. "Good." She picked up her remote control. "Now sit down and watch this with me. Your stories aren't the only ones that matter." The meeting was at 4 o'clock on a Thursday, which was the same Thursday Celeste Vane had said Marcus would sign the amended documents. He did not sign them. Zora did not know this yet when she and her mother arrived at the 43rd floor of the Harmon Financial Group building on Lexington Avenue. She knew the building was tall, and the elevator was very fast, and the carpet in the corridor outside Marcus Harmon's offices was so thick that you could not hear footsteps, which was either designed to be calming or to prevent people from hearing anyone approaching, and she was not sure which. His assistant was a woman named Patricia, who was somewhere between 50 and 70, and who looked at Zora with the expression of someone who had been briefed and still found the reality slightly unexpected. "He's just finishing a call," Patricia said. "Can I get you anything?" "Water." "Yes, please," Zora said. Patricia looked marginally warmer. She brought water in actual glasses, not plastic bottles, which Zora thought was probably a function of being on the 43rd floor. They sat in the waiting area, which had chairs that were more comfortable than they looked, and a view of the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. Zora looked at the city. She could see the general direction of their neighborhood from up here, which was something she had not expected, not the specific street or the building, but the direction, and knowing the direction made the distance feel smaller. She thought, from up here you could see more of things. She thought, but you can also be farther away from them. Understood. Marcus Harmon's office had the same view of the city, multiplied. It was a large room, but not an ostentatious one. The kind of space that was expensive without trying to tell you it was expensive, which in Zora's experience was a different kind of expensive than the kind that announced itself. There were books on the shelves that looked actually read. There were documents on the desk that had been moved, but not hidden before they came in. He stood when they entered, which Zora noticed because she had not expected it. He shook her mother's hand first. Then he looked at Zora, and he said, "Thank you for coming." "Thank you for asking," Zora said. He sat. They sat. Patricia set water on the table and left. For a moment, there was the particular quiet of a room where three people are arranging themselves relative to something important. Then Marcus said, "I want to tell you what happened this morning." Diane said, "You don't have to, Mr. Harmon." "I know I don't." He said it without the impatience that some people put into that phrase. Just flatly true. "I want to." He explained it carefully in a methodical way of someone who was accustomed to briefing people on complex situations. He had, on Wednesday morning, asked James Connell, his attorney, to review the amended documents that had been submitted for his signature the previous week. James Connell had reviewed them overnight. He had also, at Marcus's request, contacted the CFO, a man named Robert Ewan, and asked him to come in. Robert Ewan had come in at 7:30 Wednesday morning with a folder that he had apparently been keeping in his desk for 3 weeks, waiting for someone to ask. He flagged irregularities in the preliminary review, Marcus said, specifically in the structure of an asset transfer that would have taken effect 6 months after the marriage. The amendments to the documents were designed to make the transfer look like a standard prenuptial provision, but the language had been modified, subtly, by someone who understood both the financial and legal architecture, to give Celeste access to a set of European property assets that were never part of any negotiated agreement. He said it quietly and precisely, the way he apparently said everything, and Zora listened and held all of it in the same careful way she held things she needed to understand completely before she spoke about them. "The man in the service corridor," he said. "His name is Daniel Marsh. He works for a law firm in London that also represents, it turns out, Celeste's former husband. He was not supposed to be in this building or associated with any documents related to our arrangement." He paused. "He was the person who made the modifications to the amended documents," Zora said. She knew him from before. Marcus looked at her. "Yes, they have a professional relationship that was not disclosed. She planned it before she came here," Zora said. It was not a question. She was simply following the logic to where it went. "That appears to be the case." He looked at her for a moment. The scheme was specific and patient. It required someone to be in position, engaged close to the signing, before it could be executed. The European assets she was attempting to access are worth approximately $90 million. The number meant something to Zora in an abstract way, but not a specific one. She did not know what $90 million felt like to have or to lose. She knew what it felt like to watch her mother work 6 days a week and keep an envelope in the second drawer for January. She said, "Mr. Ewan, the CFO, what happens to him?" Marcus looked at her with a slight shift in his expression that she was beginning to recognize. It was the expression he made when she said something he had not expected, but that landed close to the center of something. "His position is secure," Marcus said. His concerns were legitimate, and he documented them carefully. "The fact that they were not acted on sooner is," he paused, "a failure of process that I'm accountable for." Zora nodded. She appreciated this. It was the kind of sentence that most people did not say. Her mother had been quiet through this. She was doing the careful, listening stillness. Now she said, "Mr. Harmon, may I ask what you're hoping for from this meeting?" He turned to her. "2 things," he said. "First, to ensure that you and your daughter understand the full picture of what happened and why your actions mattered. Second," he stopped. He looked at Diane with the directness that seemed to be simply how he communicated with people he was taking seriously. "To discuss your position at this hotel." Diane said, "My position? The guest services manager role," he said. "I've reviewed the process by which it was filled. I've also reviewed your record, which is..." He glanced briefly at something on his desk. "Exceptional. 7 years. Not a single guest complaint filed. 43 commendations from guests recorded in the hotel system. A staff satisfaction rating in the top 3% of the company's North American properties." He looked at her. "You should have been the obvious choice. The fact that you weren't represents a management failure that I'm also accountable for." The room was very quiet. Diane Williams sat with the careful composure she always sat with. But Zora, who had been watching her mother for 9 years, saw the thing that happened underneath it, the breath that was slightly deeper than the previous one, the way her hands, folded on the table, went very slightly still. "Mr. Harmon," her mother said, "I appreciate what you're saying, but I want to make sure I understand. Are you telling me this because of what Zora did last night?" It was a precise and honest question. Zora was proud of her mother for asking it. Marcus looked at Diane for a moment. "That's a fair question," he said. "And the honest answer is that your daughter's actions are what prompted me to look at what I should have been looking at already. The substance of what I found when I looked, your record, the management decision, the pattern that stands on its own." He paused. "I would like to think I would have found it eventually. I'm not certain. I'm certain that I should have found it sooner, and I didn't, and that's on me." Diane was quiet for another moment. "Then, what are you proposing?" "The guest services manager position is occupied," he said. "I'm not going to displace someone to correct a separate error. What I'm proposing is a new role, Director of Guest Experience, a position that has been vacant, because I hadn't found the right person to justify creating it, with the responsibilities and compensation that the role requires. He named a number that Zora did not catch completely, but that caused her mother to go very still in a new way. The current guest services manager would report to you. The position is lateral to the general manager's office. It is not a consolation. It is what your record warrants. Silence. Diane said, I need to see it in writing. You'll have it by tomorrow morning. And I need some time to consider it. Take what you need. He said it without impatience. Diane nodded once. It was the nod she gave when she had made a decision, but was not going to announce it yet. Zora looked at her mother. She looked at Marcus Harmon. She thought about what her grandmother had said. Doing the right thing starts something. It doesn't finish it. She thought, this is what it starts. Underscore. Underscore. They were almost out of the office. Patricia had reappeared to show them to the elevator when Zora stopped. She turned around. Marcus was still standing behind his desk. He had not sat back down. He watched her turn. Can I ask you something? She said. He said, yes. The woman in the corridor, Zora said. The one who came with the man through the side entrance. We said the window closes Thursday. Did you know what that meant? The window? What he was referring to. Marcus looked at her with the expression that now had a name in her mind. Genuine attention. The kind that did not happen automatically. The financial transfer has a structural window, he said. A period in which the transaction can be completed in a way that's technically compliant, but functionally opaque. After Thursday, the transfer would require additional disclosure that would have made the irregularities visible. Zora absorbed this. So, she needed you to trust her until Thursday. Yes. And you did trust her. A pause. Yes. How long had you known her? We met 14 months ago. We're engaged 4 months ago. Zora thought about 14 months. She thought about what you could learn about a person in 14 months if you were paying attention, and what you could miss if you weren't. She thought about her mother's 7 years and the manager who had given the promotion to someone who had been there less than 6. She said, do you think you'll be able to trust people again? The question came out of her the way things sometimes did. Not planned, not deliberate, but rising from whatever she had been quietly thinking about underneath the more structured thinking. She heard it and wondered for a moment if it was too much. But Marcus Harmon did not look like a person who found the question too much. He looked like a person who had not expected it and was taking it seriously. I don't know yet, he said finally. That's an honest answer. I know it is, Zora said. That's why I was asking. He looked at her for a moment in silence. Then he said, can I ask you something? Yes. Why did you stop? When you heard them talking. You had the information by the time, she said, the prenuptial provisions. Why did you keep listening? Zora thought about it. She had thought about it last night, lying awake. Because I didn't know yet if she was going to say anything that would help someone stop it, she said. The more she said, the more specific it was. Specific is harder to dismiss. He said, yes, it is. She said, also I needed to hear the CFO's name come up. Because otherwise it was just about money. And money is, she searched for the word. Money is complicated, especially for people with a lot of it. But the CFO part was about a person who told the truth and was going to be punished for it. That felt more important. Marcus Harmon was very still. He said, you're 9 years old. Yes, sir. And you understand this. I try to pay attention. He did not respond for a moment. Then he said, your grandmother. Does she live nearby? Zora frowned slightly at the change of direction. 3 blocks from us. What? Because I'd like to meet her, he said. Whoever raised the person who raised you deserves to be known. Zora thought about her grandmother in her armchair with the footstool and the remote control and the stories on television, and she thought about the 4 words, sometimes with a child. She'd probably make you sit through her stories, Zora said. That sounds fine, Marcus said. The thing about a scheme built on patience was that when it failed, the failure was thorough. Zora learned this in pieces over the following week. Not because anyone sat her down and briefed her. She was 9 and people did not brief 9-year-olds on corporate legal proceedings, but because she listened, and her mother talked to Grandma B, and Grandma did not believe in keeping things from children who were old enough to understand them. And Zora had been old enough to understand things for as long as anyone in the family could remember. Daniel Marsh, the man from the side entrance, had returned to London on Wednesday morning before Marcus's attorney had had a chance to contact him. This turned out not to matter, because the law firm he worked for had offices in New York, and by Thursday afternoon, they had been served with a preservation order requiring them to produce all documents related to their involvement with Celeste Vane and her communications with Marcus Harmon's financial team. Celeste herself had retained a lawyer before noon on Wednesday, which Marcus's attorney James Connell described to someone on a phone call as indicating a guilty conscience or excellent preparation, and I suspect it's both. What came out over the following days was both more and less dramatic than Zora had expected. More, because the scope of what Celeste had attempted was larger than what Zora had overheard in the corridor. The prenuptial provisions she had been trying to access were not simply real estate assets. They included a holding structure that, once accessed, would have given her leveraged claims on a set of European partnerships worth substantially more than the $90 million in direct assets. James Connell, reviewing the documents with 2 additional attorneys and a forensic accountant, called it elegant, in a criminal way, which Zora thought was a complicated compliment to have on your record. Less dramatic because the actual mechanics of the exposure, the documents, the attorneys, the legal proceedings, were slow and procedural and happened in offices she was not in and rooms she did not see. The story in her mind had the shape of something decisive and final. The corridor, the words, the confrontation in the ballroom hallway, the meeting in the 43rd floor office. In practice, decisive and final turn out to be the beginning of something that would take months to resolve through proper channels, and that mostly involved people she didn't know reading things she hadn't seen. What she held on to was Robert Ewan, the CFO. He came into the story for Zora through her mother, who had heard about him from conversation among the hotel management team that she had not been supposed to hear, but that had been conducted in the vicinity of the front desk in the way that conversations sometimes were when people forgot that front desk staff were not furniture. Robert Ewan was 53 years old. He had been with Marcus Harmon's financial group for 11 years. He had flagged the irregularities in the amended documents 3 weeks before Zora went down the service corridor, written a formal memorandum documenting his concerns, and placed it in a folder that he had kept in his desk drawer because everyone above him in the process had assured him it was being reviewed. He had not resigned. He had not complained. He had done what he believed was correct and then waited with the folder and the patience of someone who had decided that telling the truth was its own completion regardless of what happened after. When Marcus Harmon asked him to come in at 7:30 on Wednesday morning, Robert Ewan had brought the folder. Zora thought about this more than she thought about almost anything else that week. Not the drama of the corridor or the confrontation at the party or even the meeting in the 43rd floor office. She thought about a man with a folder in his desk drawer waiting for someone to ask. She wrote in her notebook, "Being right is not the same as being believed. Waiting for the moment to say it out loud is not the same as not saying it." He kept the folder. She wrote, "I went down the corridor." He kept the folder. We both said the same thing at different times. She thought about her mother's 7 years. She thought about the envelope in the second drawer for January. She thought about dignity as something you kept even when the person across from you didn't deserve to see it. She thought, some people keep the folder. Some people go down the corridor. The trick is knowing which one you're supposed to do. Underscore. The week after the meeting in the 43rd floor office, Marcus Harmon came to the Grand Harmon Hotel on a Tuesday afternoon. This was not unusual. He came to the hotel periodically. What was unusual was that he came on a Tuesday at 3:30, not a standard time for his visits, and that he went first not to the management offices or to the restaurant or to the event spaces, but to the front desk, where Zora's mother was working. Diane looked up when he approached the desk and did the careful composure thing and said, "Good afternoon, Mr. Harmon." He said, "I wanted to deliver this in person." He placed an envelope on the desk, the written offer, as promised. Diane said, "Thank you." Patricia is also available to answer any questions you have about the specifics. And I mean that. Any questions? Don't accept something because it sounds reasonable. Ask what it means. He paused. That's something your daughter would have told me to tell you, I think. Diane looked at him for a moment. She would have, she agreed. He said, "She's a remarkable person." Diane said, with the particular warmth she reserved for true things, "I know." Underscore. He also, true to what he had said his office, asked about Grandma B. Not immediately. This came through Diane, who mentioned it to Zora, who mentioned it to her grandmother, who said, "He wants to meet me," with the exact lack of inflection that meant she was thinking about it seriously. He said whoever raised the person who raised me deserved to be known, Zora reported. Her grandmother was quiet for a moment. "That's a good way to put it," she said. "He's careful with words," Zora said. "He thinks before he says things." Good habit. He didn't smile the whole time we were there. Until right at the end, Zora thought about the almost smile in the corridor and the real one, which had appeared briefly when she said he could meet her grandmother and she had warned him about the stories. But when he did, it was real. Her grandmother said, "Smiles that take a long time to arrive are usually the honest ones." Zora wrote that down. 3 weeks after the engagement party, Marcus Harmon came to Grandma Bea's apartment on a Saturday afternoon. He did not come with assistance or security. He came alone, which Zora had not expected, in a coat that was expensive but not showy, and with the slightly formal bearing of someone who understood they were entering a room where their usual authority did not apply and was actively trying to navigate that correctly. Grandma B had made food, not because Marcus Harmon needed to eat her cooking, but because that was how the Carter women, and by extension the Williams women, handled someone entering their space. You fed them. It was how you showed them they mattered. The apartment looked the same as it always did. It did not look different for him, which Zora thought was the right decision and which she suspected her grandmother had made deliberately. She watched him walk in and look at the room the way she had watched Celeste Vane walk into the hotel ballroom. And the difference was so complete that she almost said something about it. He did not look at the apartment the way someone catalogs an unfamiliar space. He looked at it the way someone looks at something they want to understand. The armchair, the footstool, the books in the small case beside the window, the photographs on the wall above the television. He stopped at the photographs. Zora came to stand beside him. "My great-grandmother," she said, pointing to one. "She came here from Georgia in 1962. My grandmother is the little one in the corner." She pointed. "That's my mom when she was about my age. And that's me when I was 4. He looked at the 4-year-old Zora in the photograph. Serious face, wide eyes, holding what appeared to be a very large book relative to her body, and something in his expression softened in a way that was not performance. "You haven't changed," he said. "I'm taller," she said. He almost smiled. It came faster this time. Her grandmother came from the kitchen. She moved with the particular authority of a woman who has arranged her own life on her own terms for a long time and has no intention of adjusting that now, regardless of who is visiting. She looked at Marcus Harmon with direct, assessing eyes, and he looked back at her without flinching, which Zora thought was the right thing to do. "Mr. Harmon," her grandmother said, "I hear you've had a complicated month." "Yes, ma'am," he said. "Sit down." She nodded at the couch, not the armchair, which was hers. "Food's nearly ready." He sat. He did not take out his phone. He sat with his hands resting on his knees in the space, the way the space required. Zora sat on the other end of the couch with her notebook, which she had brought without deciding to bring it, and looked at him. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. He looked at her. "That's a direct question," he said. "You look like you're thinking about something." He was quiet for a moment. "I'm thinking about the photographs," he said. 4 generations in a frame on the wall. There's something. He paused. "I grew up in a family that had photographs. Very professional ones. Arranged carefully. I'm looking at yours and thinking about the difference." "What's the difference?" He looked back at the wall. "Yours are about the people," he said. Mine were about the idea of the family. Zora thought about this. She wrote, photographs of people versus photographs of the idea of people. She underlined it. He watched her write. Do you always do that? He asked. Write things down. She looked at her notebook. Since first grade. When something seems important. What did you write just now? She showed him. He read it. He was quiet for a moment. Is that accurate? He asked. I think so. He looked at the photographs again. Yes, he said. It is. Her grandmother served lunch the way she served everything. Without fuss, without ceremony, with the straightforward abundance of someone who considers feeding people a basic act of respect. Rice and chicken and greens and cornbread. She set it on the table and sat in her own chair and did not make any particular production of it. Marcus Harmon sat at a family table and ate a meal that had not been prepared by anyone on a payroll and did not say anything about it for a long time except to eat, which was the most accurate thing he could have done. After a while, Grandma B said, My granddaughter tells me you're careful with words. He looked at her. She said that. Said you think before you say things. He considered this. I tried to, he said. I haven't always succeeded. Nobody always succeeds at anything worth doing, she said. What matters is whether you know the difference between when you got it right and when you didn't. I know the difference, he said. With the woman? He was quiet. My granddaughter told me what she heard in that corridor, Grandma B said. She was not unkind about it. She was simply clear. I know what the woman said and what it means. My question is whether you knew something was wrong before the night of the party. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. I had, he stopped. Started again. I had the sensation that something was not right. A number of times. I dismissed it because I had no specific evidence, and because I have trained myself over many years to require evidence before I act on something. He paused. What I did not account for was that the absence of evidence was itself evidence. The smooth consistency of everything was the warning. You wanted to believe it, her grandmother said simply. Yes, that's not stupidity. That's being human. She looked at him steadily. What matters now is what you do with the knowing. He said, I intend to be more careful. More careful is good, she said. More present is better. He looked at her. He seemed to be thinking about the distinction seriously. Careful means you're watching for the next problem, she said. Present means you're in the thing you're in, instead of managing it from a distance. She glanced at Zora. That one's been present her whole life. Drive her mother half crazy sometimes. But it's how she saw what she saw. Marcus looked at Zora. Zora looked back. He said, I know. On the walk home from her grandmother's building that evening, Zora and her mother walked the 3 blocks slowly, the way they walked when they were not in a hurry and the evening was mild enough to allow it. Zora was thinking about something. Mom, she said, do you think he's going to be okay? Mr. Harmon. Her mother thought about this with the seriousness she gave real questions. I think he's going to have to decide to be, she said. That's different from just being. What's the difference? Deciding means you're doing something about it. Being okay doesn't always mean you made a choice. Sometimes it just happens. She paused. He seems like someone who has to decide things. That can be hard. Zora thought about the man on the couch in her grandmother's apartment, sitting with his hands on his knees, looking at the photographs. Not performing, just looking. He sat through the whole show, she said. Grandma's stories. I heard. He didn't look like he was pretending to be interested. I heard that too. She told him the one about great-grandma, coming from Georgia. Zora had heard this story many times. It was a long story. It had several parts. He asked questions. Her mother glanced at her. What kind of questions? Good ones. Zora thought about it. He asked what she took with her, what she left behind, what she found when she got here that she hadn't expected. She paused. Grandma said he was the first person who'd asked those particular questions. Her mother was quiet. She liked him, Zora said. I know. She doesn't like everyone. I know that too. Her mother looked at her with a private smile. She likes you. I'm her granddaughter. That's not why. Her mother bumped her shoulder gently. She likes who you are. That's separate. They walked the last block in comfortable quiet. The streetlights had come on. The evening smelled like October in the city. Exhaust and cold air, and something cooking somewhere above the street. Someone's window opened just enough. Zora thought, this is the neighborhood. From the 43rd floor, you can see the direction of it, but you can't smell what's cooking. She thought, both things are true. She took out her notebook. In the pool of light under the street lamp, she wrote 2 sentences. You can see more from higher up, but seeing more is not the same as knowing more. She put the notebook away. They went inside. The offer letter came on a Thursday morning. Her mother sat at the kitchen table and read it 3 times the way she read things she needed to understand completely before she responded to them. Then she set it down and held her coffee with both hands and looked at the window over the sink and was still for a long time. Zora sat across from her and did not say anything. Finally, her mother said, I'm going to accept it. Zora nodded. It's real, her mother said. Not to Zora exactly, just to the air. It's not, she paused. I've been offered things before that had conditions I couldn't see attached. This doesn't have that quality. How do you know? Her mother looked at her. Because of the man who offered it. Because of how he offered it. She picked up the letter again. He said, ask what it means. He told me not to accept something because it sounds reasonable. She folded the letter along its original crease. Nobody tells you to read the fine print unless they're not hiding anything in it. Zora thought about this. I learned that from you, her mother said. What? Pay attention to what people tell you without meaning to. Her mother set the letter down. You taught me that, or reminded me. She looked at her daughter. You've been doing that your whole life, and I haven't always told you how much it matters. Zora looked at her hands. She thought of something and did not say it immediately, which was her habit. Then she said, you did the hard part, going to him. You had the information. The corridor was easy, Zora said. Going to you with it was easy because it's you. Going to him, she paused. You didn't know what he'd do. You didn't know what would happen to your job. You went anyway. Her mother said, that's dignity. That's dignity, Zora agreed. The first thing that changed was small. It happened on a Monday morning, 3 weeks after her mother accepted the offer, when Diane Williams walked into the Grand Harmon Hotel and went not to the front desk, but to the office on the 2nd floor that had been vacant for 8 months and that now had her name on a card beside the door. Not a temporary card, a real one, set into the frame, the kind that assumed permanence. Zora was not there for this. She was in school, but her mother told her about it that evening at the kitchen table. And what she said was not about the office or the card or the title. What she said was, I stood in the doorway for a minute before I went in. Zora looked at her. Why? Because I wanted to remember what standing there felt like. Before everything in the room became ordinary. Which it will. Her mother held her coffee with both hands. Things become ordinary. But the first time you stand in a doorway, that stays if you pay attention to it. Zora wrote this down later. Underscore. Marcus Harmon called Robert Ewan into his office on a Wednesday morning and told him 3 things. The first was that his analysis of the amended documents had been correct in every particular, and that his formal documentation had been essential to everything that followed. The second was that his contract was being renewed 2 years ahead of schedule, and that any future concerns Robert raised would be reviewed by Marcus personally rather than routed through the standard chain. The third thing, and this was the one Robert Ewan apparently sat with for a long moment before responding, was that Marcus said directly and without qualification, I should have found your memo sooner. That's on me. I'm sorry. Robert Ewan said, thank you for saying that. Then he picked up his folder and went back to his office. Marcus told Zora this on a Saturday in December at her grandmother's kitchen table. He had come back twice since the first visit, both times without advance production. Both times he sat where he was put and ate what he was given and asked the questions that genuine curiosity produced rather than the questions that social management required. Grandma B had started leaving the armchair footstool accessible on the days she expected him, which was her form of welcome and which Zora recognized as significant. Why are you telling me about Mr. Ewan? Zora asked. Because you asked about him first, Marcus said. In my office. Before you asked about anything else, including what was going to happen to your mother's position. Because he was already there before me, Zora said. He had already done the right thing before I went down the corridor. He should have been the one who fixed it. She paused. It wasn't fair that it needed a 9-year-old in a service corridor to make it matter. No, Marcus said. It wasn't. She nodded and wrote it down anyway. Underscore. In March, the hotel held its annual staff recognition dinner. Marcus stayed through the whole program this year, which was unusual, and at the end of it, he went to the podium. He did not talk about occupancy rates or competitive metrics. He talked about what it meant to hand someone a key to a room and make them feel, in 3 sentences, that the room had been waiting for them specifically. He said, I have been in this building in one form or another for most of my life. I have been in the rooms, in the offices, and the boardroom. I had not spent enough time at the front desk. He said Diane's name, in front of the room. He said that her new role reflected not a decision made in the past quarter, but 7 years of work that had always deserved recognition and was receiving it now because it was right, not because it was timely. The room applauded. Her mother told Zora this at the kitchen table that night with the good syrup on the counter because it was that kind of occasion. She told it carefully, the way she told things she wanted to remember accurately. When she finished, she held her coffee with both hands and was very still. Zora looked at her mother and thought, this is what it looks like when someone is finally, completely, specifically seen. She did not write it down. Some things you just hold. Her mother made pancakes at 9:30 at night, which was unusual and perfect, and they ate together in the quiet of the kitchen with the lamp on and the city going by outside the window. After a while, Zora said, Are you happy? Her mother looked at her. Yes. Simply, without qualification. The envelope in the drawer, Zora said. The January 1. Do we still need it the same way? Her mother was quiet for a moment. We'll keep it, not because we need it the same way, but knowing you have something set aside. That's not about fear. That's about being thoughtful. She looked at Zora. We'll keep it, and we'll know why we're keeping it. That's different from keeping it because you're scared. The difference between doing something out of fear and doing the same thing out of care, Zora said. Same action, different reason, completely different life. Zora ate her pancake and thought about corridors and folders and dignity and what you keep and why you keep it. On the last Saturday of August, all 3 of them were at the kitchen table in the apartment on the 3rd floor, Zora and her mother and Grandma B, together for no particular occasion except that it was a Saturday, which had always been reason enough. The good syrup was on the table. Grandma B was talking about a show she was watching. Her mother was half listening in the way she did when she was also thinking about something else. Zora was looking at the window above the sink, the one that faced the interior courtyard. She thought, this is a full table. She thought about Marcus Harmon sitting on her grandmother's couch without his phone, staying through the television stories, asking the right questions. She thought about Robert Ewan with his folder waiting for someone to ask. About her mother at the front desk for 7 years. About the sentence Marcus had said to a full room. I had not spent enough time at the front desk. Her grandmother said, Zora, you're making that face. I'm thinking about what happened since October, she said. Trying to understand what it means. Not what happened specifically. What it means is a thing that happened in my life. Her grandmother said, and Zora took her time. I went down that corridor because something felt wrong and I trusted that feeling even though I wasn't certain. And because of that, things got corrected that were going to hurt people. Mr. Ewan kept his job. My mom got her real title. Mr. Harmon got to see what was actually happening in his own life. She paused. But none of those things were why I went down the corridor. Why did you? Her mother asked. Because it felt wrong. That was enough. I didn't know what would come after. I just knew something was wrong, and I was the one who was there. She looked at her hands. That's all it was. I was just the one who was there. The table was quiet. Then her grandmother said, That's everything. Zora looked at her. Being the one who is there, her grandmother said. and doing something because you're there instead of waiting for someone else to. She looked at Zora with the full steadiness of a woman who had watched 4 generations of her family and understood all of them. That's all it ever is, for anyone who does anything that matters. Her mother nodded once, the nod of someone confirming something that had always been true. Zora looked at the window, at the courtyard light, at the table with the good syrup and the 3 generations who had always been exactly who they were. She thought, I've always been this person. It just needed a corridor and a night in October to make it visible. She ate the rest of her breakfast. Zora turned 10 on a Friday in April. Her mother made pancakes with a good syrup. Grandma B came for dinner and brought the yellow cake with the chocolate frosting that had been the birthday cake in the family since before Diane was born, the recipe written in her great-grandmother's handwriting on a card kept in the kitchen cabinet. After the cake, there was a knock at the door. Marcus Harmon stood in the hallway with a box wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. You were invited, Zora said. You could have just come in. I know, he said. I wanted to knock. He came inside and held out the box. She took it and sat on the floor, cross-legged, and undid the string carefully and opened the paper without tearing it, because she had learned from her grandmother that paper could be reused and that reusing it was not about money, but about not wasting the careful attention someone had put into wrapping a thing. Inside was a notebook, not a composition book from the school supply section of the pharmacy. A real notebook, bound in dark blue cloth, thick cream-colored pages, her name embossed on the cover in small gold letters. Zora Williams. Below it, also embossed, things that seem important. She looked at it for a long time. You remembered, she said. You said you've been doing it since 1st grade, he said. I thought the occasion warranted an upgrade. She ran her thumb over the letters. Her name, then the phrase beneath it. Her phrase. The thing she had been doing her whole life without ever naming it, until now it was named on the cover of a book and given back to her. She looked up at him. This is the most specific gift I've ever been given. It should be, he said. You're a specific person. Her grandmother, from the armchair. She always has been. Her mother said nothing from the kitchen doorway. But Zora looked at her and saw the expression that was not the lobby smile or the front desk smile or even the private smile. It was something underneath all of those that the past months had finally made room for on the surface. Pride, the quiet, complete, unhurried kind. Underscore. Later, when Grandma B had gone home and her mother was getting ready for bed, Zora sat at the kitchen table with the new notebook open to the first page. She held her pen. She thought about the night in October when she had walked 7 blocks to a hotel because she did not want to just sit and wait. She thought about the corridor and the cold feeling at the back of her neck and the specific words she had carried carefully through a crowded room. She thought about her mother at the front desk and the 45 seconds that Marcus Harmon had prepared to give and the way they had stretched into something different, because she had looked at him and not looked away. She thought about Robert Ewan and his folder, about the word dignity and everything it held, about the good syrup on the high shelf and what it meant to save something for the right moment, about her grandmother saying sometimes it's a child, about the difference between being careful and being present. She wrote on the first page, the truth doesn't need you to make it true. It's already true. What it needs is someone to go down the corridor and say it out loud. She thought for a moment. Then underneath it she wrote, not because you're brave, because it's wrong for it to stay quiet. She looked at what she had written and thought it was right. She closed the notebook and ran her thumb over her name on the cover one last time. Zora Williams. The letters were exact and specific and permanent. She went to bed with the lamp off, and outside the city went on being itself, full and complicated and impossible to see entirely from any one position. In the 3rd-floor apartment on Glenwood, In the kitchen with the window that let in the underwater light, the good syrup sat on the counter where her mother had left it. And it was not the last time it would be there. Underscore, 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 underscore. Thank you for staying all the way to the end. The people who finish the whole story are the ones who understand it, and the ones who share it. If this one moved you, the next video on your screen is waiting to do the same. And if you haven't subscribed yet, come back. There's always another child the world underestimated. And we tell those stories here.